The twin sons of Arvax cast long shadows across the marble corridors of the imperial palace. Their crimson-gold light filtered through tall, crystalline windows, painting the halls in hues of amber and blood. Queen Zyria of the Zarian Empire stood at the balcony overlooking the floating gardens, her emerald skin catching the dying light of day. Her obsidian hair cascaded down her back like a midnight waterfall, adorned with silver threads that glinted with her slightest movement. The queen's royal attire, an intricate armor merged with a flowing cape, bore the three colors of her reign: deep forest green, midnight black, and sterling silver. The patterns etched into the metallic portions of her garments told stories of conquest and glory that had defined the first years of her rule. "Your Majesty," a voice called from behind. "The court awaits." Zyria did not turn immediately. Her gaze remained fixed on the horizon where both suns touched the edge of her world. Only when the second voice grew bolder did she acknowledge the interruption. "The human prisoner has been prepared as requested." At this, she turned. Her eyes, a piercing shade somewhere between silver and ice, narrowed slightly. "Bring him to the assembly. I want the court to see what becomes of those who resist the inevitable." The corridors leading to the grand hall echoed with the synchronized footsteps of the royal guard. Queen Zyria walked with measured grace, her cape sweeping behind her like a living shadow. The palace walls displayed tapestries of battles won and worlds conquered, silent witnesses to the expanding might of the Zarian Empire. In the grand hall, hundreds of nobles, generals, and representatives from vassal planets stood in rigid formation. Their murmurs ceased abruptly as the massive doors swung open. Queen Zyria entered, her presence commanding absolute attention and reverence. She walked to her throne, a masterpiece of carved obsidian and emerald, and took her seat with practiced precision. "Bring forth the human," she commanded, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade of ice. From a side entrance, guards dragged forward a man in loose, simple clothing. His hands bore loose chains, a symbolic rather than functional restraint. Unlike the other prisoners who had been paraded before the court in recent months, this one did not tremble. His shoulders remained straight, his head neither bowed in submission nor raised in defiance. There was something in his posture that spoke of quiet dignity rather than rebellion. The queen's eyes lingered on him longer than necessary. Something about the human intrigued her. Perhaps it was the collection of old scars visible on his forearms, telling stories of a life lived through hardship. Or maybe it was the calm in his eyes, not resignation, but a peculiar form of peace that seemed out of place in a prisoner. As the human was positioned at the edge of the assembly, Zyria noticed him glance toward the great windows where the twin suns were setting. For the briefest moment, something like longing crossed his features, a flash of emotion so genuine that it caught the queen off guard. Their eyes met across the crowded hall, and in that fraction of a second, Zyria felt an inexplicable connection, as if this nameless human understood something about her that her own people did not. She quickly composed herself, rising from her throne to address the court. "Distinguished members of the Zarian court," she began, her voice carrying to every corner of the hall. "We gather today to reaffirm the principles that have guided our empire to greatness. Our dominion extends across 17 star systems, and still, there are those who would resist our rightful expansion." As she continued her speech, detailing new policies and veiled threats to potential enemies, a silent exchange of glances occurred among certain members of the court. Had the queen been watching more closely, she might have noticed the subtle nods between a general at the back and three nobles standing near the eastern pillars. The human prisoner, called Galen in his world, observed everything. Though he appeared to be staring at the floor, his attention shifted constantly, noting the positions of guards, the expressions of courtiers, and most significantly, the restless movements of certain individuals who seemed unusually tense. As Queen Zyria concluded her address, she made direct reference to the humans standing at the edge of the assembly. "Let this one serve as a reminder." She gestured toward Galen without looking at him. The fate of those who stand against the Zarian Empire is subjugation or destruction. There is no middle ground. The court applauded dutifully, but beneath the sound of their approval, a more ominous movement was taking place. As if sensing it before it happened, Galen's muscles tensed. His eyes darted to the balconies above, where shadows moved against the fading light. Queen Ziria, unaware of the danger, descended the steps from her throne to walk among her subjects, a rare gesture meant to intimidate through proximity. She stopped near Galen, and for a moment their eyes met again. It was then that he saw it, the glint of metal from above. The first arrow whistled through the air with deadly precision, aimed directly at the queen's heart. In the grand courtyard of the Arvaxian palace, the late afternoon light painted everything in shades of amber and crimson. The polished marble floor reflected the twin suns' dying rays, creating an otherworldly glow beneath the feet of the assembled dignitaries. Flags bearing the royal colors, green, black, and silver, fluttered in the gentle breeze, their movement hypnotic against the darkening sky. Queen Ziria stood at the center of the courtyard, her regal posture unwavering as she delivered her address. Her voice, cold and clear, carried across the assembly with supernatural precision. Those who oppose the expansion of the Zarian Empire will find themselves swept away like dust before a storm, she proclaimed, her words making several representatives from recently conquered worlds flinch visibly. Resistance is not merely futile. It is an offense punishable by complete eradication. The assembled court maintained a respectful silence, though fear and admiration mingled in equal measure on their faces. At the far corner, Galen remained on his knees as instructed, the loose chains on his wrists more symbolic than restrictive. Unlike the nobles who averted their eyes from the queen's intense gaze, he watched everything with quiet attention. It happened in an instant. A whisper of movement from the rooftops surrounding the courtyard. A glint of metal catching the last rays of the twin suns. Before anyone could comprehend what was happening, the air filled with the deadly hiss of arrows, dozens of them, all converging toward a single target, Queen Ziria. The court erupted into chaos. Nobles scrambled for cover, their dignified facades crumbling into primal fear. Royal guards, caught completely off guard, fumbled to raise their shields, their reactions fatally delayed. In the midst of the pandemonium, Queen Ziria remained motionless. Whether from shock or pride, she stood tall, chin raised, as if daring death itself to take her. Perhaps she believed that showing fear in her final moments would undermine everything she had built. But those final moments never came. In a blur of movement that defied his status as a chained prisoner, Galen broke free from his guards and launched himself toward the queen. His body collided with hers just as the first arrows reached their position. Instead of finding their mark in the queen's heart, they buried themselves deep into Galen's back and shoulders. One arrow, then another and another. Each impact sent shockwaves of agony through his body, but still he remained standing, using himself as a human shield. Through gritted teeth, he maneuvered the queen behind a column, his body continuously blocking the trajectory of incoming arrows. "Stay down," he managed to say, his voice strained but firm. Queen Ziria looked up at him, genuine shock replacing her usual cold composure. Never in her reign had anyone shown such selfless courage. Certainly not for her personal safety rather than the abstract concept of the throne. The barrage continued. An arrow grazed Galen's cheek, leaving a thin line of crimson. Another penetrated his right thigh, causing him to stumble. But each time his body threatened to give way, he steadied himself, determined to remain the barrier between death and the queen. The royal guards finally mobilized, rushing to surround their sovereign with raised shields. But the damage, or rather, the miracle, had already occurred. For poisoned arrows protruded from Galen's body, each one meant for the queen's heart. As the last arrow found its mark in his shoulder, Galen's knees finally buckled. He collapsed to the marble floor, blood pooling beneath him. The poison worked quickly, sending tendrils of fire through his veins. Yet somehow, through the haze of pain and approaching darkness, He managed to turn his head toward Queen Ziria. "Are you unharmed?" he asked, his words barely audible. The queen, for perhaps the first time in her reign, found herself speechless. She knelt beside him, indifferent to the blood soaking into her royal garments. With trembling hands that had signed execution orders without hesitation, she now cradled the head of a man she had considered nothing more than a symbol of her conquests. "All royal physicians," she shouted, her voice betraying an emotion her court had never witnessed. "Save him, at any cost." The courtiers watched in stunned silence as their queen, the embodiment of Zarian superiority, personally helped carry a human prisoner toward the healing chambers. Whispers immediately began circulating among them, some of astonishment, others of jealousy, and a few of genuine concern about what this unprecedented display might mean for the Empire's strict hierarchy. As she walked, supporting Galen's weight with unexpected strength, Queen Ziria caught the eyes of her High Counselor, who regarded the scene with poorly disguised disapproval. "Prepare the regeneration mesh," she commanded, ignoring his expression. "And find those assassins. I want them alive enough to suffer." In the background, several guards had apprehended 2 of the attackers, but others had escaped in the confusion. The captured assassins wore no identifying marks, but their equipment suggested high-level backing. Someone with resources had funded this attempt. As they reached the healing chambers, Galen's consciousness was fading rapidly. The poison was designed to kill quickly, leaving no chance for traditional antidotes. Only the advanced Zarian medical technology stood a chance of saving him now. Queen Ziria herself supervised as the medical team cut away his blood-soaked clothing and placed him within the regeneration chamber, a translucent pod filled with a luminescent blue liquid. As the arrows were carefully extracted and the healing process began, she remained by the chamber, her usual schedule of royal duties completely abandoned. One of the physicians approached cautiously. "Your Majesty, it may be hours before we know if he will survive. The Council awaits your presence to discuss the security breach." "The Council can wait," she replied without turning her gaze from the regeneration chamber. "I will remain until he opens his eyes." In the pod, Galen floated unconscious, his body suspended in the healing liquid. The queen placed her palm against the transparent surface, her reflection overlapping with his suspended form. For the first time since her coronation, Ziria felt something crack within her carefully constructed facade of invulnerability. A nameless human had jumped in front of arrows meant for her, and she couldn't begin to understand why. The healing chambers of the Imperial Palace hummed with the soft, rhythmic pulse of advanced medical technology. The regeneration mesh, a webbing of bioluminescent fibers, enveloped Galen's wounded body, systematically repairing damaged tissue and neutralizing the deadly poison that had coated the assassin's arrows. Queen Ziria had maintained her vigil for hours, dismissing multiple attendants who suggested she attend to pressing matters of state. Now, in the relative privacy of the medical wing, she allowed herself a moment of genuine reflection. She paced beside the healing pod, occasionally stopping to study the unconscious human whose inexplicable actions had saved her life. "The arrows were aimed with precision," said Commander Varek, the head of royal security who had just entered the chamber. "This was not a random attack, but a coordinated assassination attempt." "I am aware," replied the queen, her voice cold. "What I want to know is how they penetrated our defenses." Varek's posture stiffened. "We are investigating, Your Majesty. The preliminary findings suggest internal collaboration." "Traitors within my court," she said, the words more statement than question. "Identify them." "Yes, Your Majesty." Varek hesitated before adding, "There is another matter concerning the human." Queen Ziria turned her full attention to the commander. "Speak. Some members of the council are concerned about your personal attention to this prisoner. They suggest that once healed, he should be removed from the palace." "Removed?" The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. "This man stepped in front of arrows meant for me, while my own guards failed to react in time. And the council suggests I discard him like a used weapon." Varek shifted uncomfortably. They argue that elevating a conquered species, particularly in such a public manner, undermines the principles of Zarian supremacy upon which the empire is built. Before the queen could respond, a young military officer entered the chamber and bowed deeply. "Your Majesty, I came as soon as I heard what happened," said Lieutenant Kyra, one of the younger officers who had distinguished herself in recent campaigns. What the human did was... She struggled to find the appropriate word. "Honorable." "Indeed," agreed the queen. "Not all share your assessment, Lieutenant." "Permission to speak freely?" asked Kyra. Ziria nodded. "True loyalty cannot be coerced through fear alone," said the lieutenant. "What we witnessed today was genuine devotion, something rarer and more valuable than obedience driven by terror." Commander Varek frowned at the young officer's words, but Queen Ziria considered them carefully. "You suggest I should value this display of... what? Sacrifice. I suggest, Your Majesty, that someone willing to die for you without being ordered to do so might be worth more than those who prostrate themselves before you only to plot your downfall behind closed doors." The queen's expression remained unreadable, but something in Lieutenant Kyra's words resonated with her. She dismissed both officers and returned to her solitary watch over the healing pod. Hours later, as the twin suns began their rise over the horizon, Galen's eyes flickered open. Through the translucent blue of the regeneration fluid, he found himself looking directly at Queen Ziria, who had fallen asleep in a chair beside the pod. Even in slumber, she maintained a certain regal bearing, though the vulnerability of the moment struck him as profoundly human. As if sensing his consciousness, she awakened, immediately straightening her posture. With a gesture, she signaled the medical staff to drain the pod. As the fluid receded and the mesh retracted, Galen found himself able to sit up, though his body still ached from the trauma it had endured. A physician approached with a scanner, evaluating his condition. "Remarkable recovery," he reported. The human physiology responded exceptionally well to the regeneration process. Queen Ziria dismissed the medical staff with a wave of her hand, leaving her alone with Galen. For a long moment, they simply regarded each other in silence. "Why?" she finally asked, the single word carrying the weight of genuine perplexity. Galen, still adjusting to the sensation of breathing normal air again, took a moment to respond. "Why what, Your Majesty?" "You know precisely what I'm asking," she said, her tone hardening slightly. "You disobeyed a direct order to remain in your designated position. You interfered with an imperial situation. You nearly died. All for what purpose?" He met her gaze directly, an act that would have earned most people severe punishment. "Not all actions require calculation of personal gain." "Everything requires calculation," she countered. "Politics, survival, war, all are equations to be solved." "And yet," he said quietly, "when the arrows flew, did you calculate whether to dodge left or right? Or did you simply stand your ground because that's who you are?" The queen's eyes narrowed at his presumption. "You claim to know who I am. I claim to recognize someone who still believes in something greater than themselves, despite the weight of a crown." His words hung in the air between them, dangerously close to both truth and treason. For a moment, it seemed the queen might call for guards to remove him. Instead, she asked another question. "What is your name?" "Your real name, not the designation in our prisoner records." "Galen," he replied simply. Queen Ziria stepped closer, studying him with renewed interest. "Well, Galen of Earth, your actions have created quite the political situation. The noble houses are in uproar. Some believe you were planted as part of the assassination plot. Others think you seek to curry favor through dramatic means." "And what do you believe?" he asked. The question was bold, almost insolent, but the queen found herself answering nonetheless. "I believe," she said slowly, "that I should have had you executed on the spot for breaking formation. It would have been the politically expedient choice." Galen said nothing, waiting. "Instead," she continued, "I find myself curious about a man who would shield someone he has every reason to hate." Before he could respond, the doors to the medical chamber opened, and a delegation of counselors entered. Their expressions ranged from concerned to openly hostile as they observed the queen in private conversation with a human. "Your Majesty," said the eldest counselor, bowing stiffly, "we must discuss security arrangements in light of yesterday's events." And he added with a pointed glance at Galland, "The disposition of this individual." Queen Ziria straightened to her full height, the momentary openness in her expression replaced by regal authority. "Indeed, Council Elderdras, we have much to discuss, including the failure of our vaunted security systems to detect arrows aimed at their queen." She turned back to Galland. "Rest. Recover. We will speak again." As she departed with her council, Galland caught a final glance from the queen, a look that contained something beyond the cold calculation she claimed guided all her decisions. It was a look of someone seeing clearly for the first time in a very long while. Outside the healing chambers, the political storm was just beginning to gather force. Rumors spread through the palace like wildfire. The human prisoner who saved the queen, the nobles who whispered of weakness, and somewhere in the shadows, the mastermind behind the assassination attempt, watching and waiting for the next opportunity to strike. In the days that followed, Galland's strength returned gradually. The regeneration technology had repaired most of the physical damage, but his body still needed time to fully recover from the trauma. He had been moved from the medical wing to a modest but comfortable chamber, a significant upgrade from his previous accommodations as a prisoner. Though no longer bound by chains, he remained under constant observation. Guard posted outside his door maintained a watchful eye, though their demeanor had noticeably shifted. Some regarded him with newfound respect, while others viewed him with suspicion, as if waiting for him to reveal some hidden agenda. On the third day of his recovery, Lieutenant Kyra visited his chamber. "The court is in chaos," she informed him without preamble. "Your actions have sparked quite the debate." Galland, who had been standing by the window overlooking the floating gardens, turned to face her. "I didn't realize saving someone's life could be so controversial." Kyra's lips quirked into a half-smile. In the Zarian Empire, everything is political, especially when it involves the queen. She moved closer, lowering her voice despite the fact that they were alone. "You should know that not everyone is pleased with the attention Her Majesty has shown you. The High Council, in particular, sees you as a threat to established order." "I'm hardly in a position to threaten anyone," Galland replied, gesturing to his still healing body. "It's not your physical capabilities that concern them," Kyra explained. "It's your influence. The queen has never shown such personal interest in anyone before. Some fear what that might mean." Before Galland could respond, the door opened again. This time, it was Queen Ziria herself who entered, causing Kyra to snap to immediate attention with a formal salute. "Leave us," the queen commanded, and Kyra departed swiftly after a respectful bow. Alone with Galland once more, Queen Ziria seemed to carry a heavier burden than during their last encounter. The weight of her office, the endless political maneuvering, the constant vigilance against threats, showed in the slight tension around her eyes. "My council believes you present a unique problem," she began without preamble. "They argue that your actions, while seemingly heroic, undermine the very foundation of our imperial philosophy." "And what philosophy is that?" Galland asked. "That the strong rule, the weak serve, and order must be maintained at all costs." She moved to the window where he had been standing moments before, gazing out at the twin suns. "They believe that by elevating you, a human, a prisoner, I diminish the throne's authority." "And what do you believe?" he asked, echoing their earlier conversation. Queen Ziria turned to face him directly. "I believe that leadership without true loyalty is merely tyranny with ornate trappings. My ancestors built this empire through strength, yes, but also through inspiring, genuine devotion." She stepped closer, studying him with those penetrating silver-ice eyes. "You had no reason to save me. No obligation. No hope of reward. And yet you did." "What?" Galland considered his answer carefully. "Where I come from, we have a saying, you don't need a reason to help someone still capable of doing good in the world." "You believe I'm capable of good?" There was a note of genuine surprise in her voice. "I've seen how your people look at you," he replied. "Not just with fear, but with hope. Those who truly hate their rulers don't look hopeful. Something softened almost imperceptibly in the queen's expression. The assassination attempt was not random, she said, changing the subject. We've identified several conspirators, though the ringleader remains elusive. Political rivals? Almost certainly. The arrows were tipped with a rare poison found only on the eastern continent of Arvax. Few have access to it. Their conversation was interrupted by a firm knock at the door. Commander Varek entered, his expression grave. Your Majesty, forgive the interruption, but the Council has convened an emergency session. They demand your presence. Queen Ziria's jaw tightened. Tell them I will arrive when I am ready. They insist, Your Majesty. They claim the matter concerns imperial security at the highest level. The Queen hesitated, then nodded curtly. Very well. She turned back to Galen. This conversation is not finished. As she moved to leave, she paused at the door. Tomorrow, there will be a formal ceremony to recognize your actions. The Council opposed it, of course, but on this matter, I have overruled them. After she departed, Commander Varek lingered a moment longer, his gaze fixed on Galen with barely concealed hostility. Whatever game you're playing, human, know this. Her Majesty may be momentarily intrigued by your actions, but the Empire has endured for millennia through adherence to our principles. Those who threaten that order rarely survive long enough to enjoy their brief favor. With that ominous warning, he too departed, leaving Galen alone with his thoughts and the growing sense that the arrows that had struck him might have been the least of the dangers he now faced. The grand hall of the Arvaxian palace had been transformed for the ceremony. The normally austere space now gleamed with additional light crystals, casting prismatic reflections across the marble floor. The royal colors, green, black, and silver, adorned every column and archway, while members of all the noble houses had assembled in their ceremonial attire. Queen Ziria sat upon her throne, the picture of imperial majesty. Her armor, more ornate than usual, incorporated elements that subtly echoed the traditional garb of ancient Zarian war queens. A circlet of silver and emerald rested upon her brow, its design suggesting a stylized corona of light, a reference to the twin sons of Arvax. From his position in a side chamber, Galen could see the assembly through a partially open door. He had been provided with new attire for the occasion. Simple but elegant garments in muted tones that nonetheless marked a significant departure from his previous prisoner's clothing. It's time, said Lieutenant Kyra, who had been assigned as his escort. Are you nervous? Galen adjusted the sleeve of his new garment, covering some of the scars on his forearm. I'm not accustomed to being the center of attention. Well, you certainly have everyone's attention now, she replied with a hint of amusement. Half the court is convinced you're part of some elaborate plot, and the other half is already composing ballads about the human who saved the queen. Before he could respond, ceremonial horns sounded, signaling the commencement of the proceedings. Kyra nodded toward the entrance. That's our cue. They entered the grand hall to the scrutiny of hundreds of eyes. Some gazes held curiosity, others suspicion, and a few, particularly among the younger military officers, showed something like respect. The noble houses, however, made little attempt to hide their disdain. As Galen approached the throne, he could feel the weight of tradition and protocol pressing down upon the assembly. What Queen Ziria was about to do represented a significant break from imperial custom, a fact not lost on anyone present. He stopped at the designated distance from the throne and bowed as he had been instructed. Queen Ziria rose, her movements deliberate and regal. Today, she began, her voice carrying effortlessly through the hall, we recognize an act of extraordinary courage and loyalty. She descended the steps from her throne, a move that caused a ripple of whispers throughout the assembly. Traditionally, the monarch remained elevated throughout such ceremonies, recipients coming to the throne rather than the sovereign approaching them. 3 days ago, an attempt was made on my life, she continued, now standing before Galen. While those sworn to protect me hesitated, this man, a stranger to our world, our customs, our conflicts, acted without hesitation. Murmurs grew louder among the assembled nobles. From the corner of his eye, Galen could see Council Elder Draz's face darken with barely contained outrage. The arrows meant for my heart found their mark in his flesh instead, the queen declared. Each scar he now bears was earned in service to a ruler not his own, to a world not his own. She gestured, and an attendant approached bearing a small cushion upon which rested a silver emblem, a shield with the twin sons of Arvax emblazoned upon it. Galen of Earth, Queen Ziria pronounced formally, I name you Shield of Arvax. From this day forward, you are neither prisoner nor subject, but honored protector of the crown. She took the emblem and with her own hands affixed it to the shoulder of his garment. The symbolism was lost on no one. This was a title of her own creation, outside the traditional hierarchy, answerable directly to her. These scars, she said, loud enough for all to hear, these arrows prove that true loyalty cannot be purchased with rank or bloodline. It is earned through action and sacrifice. The hall had grown deathly quiet. Even those most opposed to the proceedings dared not interrupt the queen in the midst of a formal ceremony. Galen, recognizing the significance of the moment, knelt before her, not in subjugation, but in acknowledgement of the honor being bestowed. It was in this moment, with the queen standing tall and the newly appointed shield kneeling before her, that chaos erupted. A thunderous explosion shook the eastern entrance to the grand hall. Smoke billowed into the chamber as armed figures poured through the breach. They wore no insignia, but their weapons and tactics spoke of professional training. Protect the queen, Commander Varek shouted, rushing forward with the royal guard. But the attack had been meticulously planned. As the guards moved to form a protective perimeter around Queen Ziria, a second explosion rocked the western side of the hall. More attackers streamed in, catching the defenders in a pincer movement. Galen reacted instinctively. Despite his still healing wounds, he rose swiftly and positioned himself at the queen's side. We need to move, he urged. This is a coordinated strike. For once, Queen Ziria did not contest his assessment. Together, they began moving toward a concealed exit behind the throne, while the royal guard engaged the attackers. The nobles and dignitaries scattered in panic, some fleeing toward the exits, others caught in the crossfire. Through the chaos, Galen caught sight of Council Elder Draz and several other high-ranking officials being escorted away by guards. But something about their movement struck him as odd. They weren't running from the attackers. They were moving with them. Your Majesty, he said urgently, I believe some of your council are involved in this coup. Queen Ziria's expression hardened. I suspected as much since the arrow attack. This confirms it. They had nearly reached the concealed exit when a group of attackers broke through the defensive line, charging directly toward them. With no time to escape, they turned to face their assailants. To Galen's surprise, Queen Ziria reached beneath her ceremonial cape and withdrew a slender blade, clearly not just for decoration. Her stance shifted, revealing combat training that her regal bearing had previously concealed. Can you fight? She asked, not taking her eyes off the approaching enemies. Not as well as you, I suspect, Galen replied, but well enough. The first attacker reached them, swinging a heavy energy baton. Ziria parried the blow with preternatural speed, her blade slicing through the attacker's armor at a weak joint. Galen engaged the second assailant, using his environment to compensate for his lack of a weapon. He grabbed a ceremonial staff from a nearby stand and used it to deflect a blow meant for the queen's back. They fought side by side, their movements gradually synchronizing as they defended each other's blind spots. For every strike Galen blocked, Ziria delivered a precise counterstrike. For each enemy she engaged, he ensured no others could flank her. Across the hall, Lieutenant Kyra had rallied a group of loyal guards and was fighting her way toward the throne. To the queen, she shouted above the din of battle. The tide began to turn as the element of surprise faded and the superior training of the royal forces asserted itself. Several of the attackers had been captured or subdued, while others retreated toward the breached entrances. It was in this moment, When victory seemed within reach, that council elder, Draz, revealed himself. He emerged from behind a column, flanked by two heavily armed guards in modified royal uniforms. In his hand, he held a weapon unlike anything Galen had seen before, a device emitting a pulsing energy field that distorted the air around it. "The old order ends today, Ziria," he called out, his voice amplified to carry across the battle-scarred hall. "Your weakness has been exposed. The Empire requires strength, not sentiment." Queen Ziria faced him squarely, her blade still drawn. "Treason from my High Council. How disappointing, yet predictable." "Not treason," Draz corrected. "Evolution. The strong replace the weak. The fundamental law of our empire. And you have shown weakness." He raised the weapon, aiming directly at the queen. "Your father would never have allowed a human to stand at his side. He understood that to rule is to remain apart, untouched by lesser beings." "My father is dead," Ziria replied coldly. "And so is his era of isolation." Draz activated the weapon. A pulse of energy, visible as a distortion in the air, shot toward the queen. Galen, seeing it coming, knew instantly that this was no ordinary weapon. This was something designed specifically to bypass royal defenses. Without hesitation, he threw himself into the path of the energy pulse. The impact knocked him backward, his body convulsing as the weapon's effect spread through his system. It felt like every nerve ending was being simultaneously frozen and set ablaze. Queen Ziria's cry of rage echoed through the hall as she witnessed Galen's sacrifice. In a movement almost too fast to follow, she hurled her blade directly at Draz. The counselor, his attention fixed on Galen's fallen form, failed to react in time. The blade embedded itself in his shoulder, causing him to drop the weapon. With her adversary momentarily disabled, Queen Ziria knelt beside Galen, who lay trembling from the weapon's effects. "Twice now," she said, her voice thick with an emotion no one in the court had ever heard from her before. "Twice you have placed yourself between me and death." Royal guards surrounded them, Lieutenant Kyra among them, forming a protective circle as medics rushed forward. "This one still lives," Kyra called out, indicating Draz was being restrained despite his injury. "He will answer for his crimes." But Queen Ziria's attention remained fixed on Galen, whose condition was clearly critical. The energy weapon had caused damage unlike conventional injuries, damage that even the advanced medical technologies of Azarians might struggle to repair. "Take him to the royal healing chamber," she commanded. "Use the sovereign protocols." The chief medical officer looked startled. "Your Majesty, those are reserved exclusively for the royal family." "Did I stutter?" she demanded, her voice like ice. "He bears the title Shield of Arvax. He will receive treatment befitting that honor." As Galen was carefully transported from the battle-scarred hall, the queen rose to her feet, surveying the aftermath of the coup attempt. Her silver ice eyes, normally so controlled, now burned with a cold fury that made even her loyal guards step back. "Secure the traitors," she commanded. "Every conspirator will face imperial justice." Lieutenant Kyra approached cautiously. "Your Majesty, we've captured 17 of the attackers alive. Preliminary interrogation suggests involvement from multiple noble houses." "And Council Elder Draz?" the queen asked, her gaze shifting to where the wounded counselor was being restrained. "Alive, but refusing to speak," Kyra reported. "The weapon he used, our technicians have never seen its like before. It appears designed specifically to penetrate royal defenses." Queen Ziria's expression hardened further. "Then someone has been planning this for a very long time." She glanced toward the exit where Galen had been taken. "I will oversee the human's treatment personally. Commander Varek, secure the palace and initiate lockdown protocols. No one enters or leaves until we've identified every accomplice in this treachery." As she strode from the hall, the whispers began anew, not of disdain now, but of fear and awe. The queen, who had shown unprecedented concern for a human, was now displaying equally unprecedented wrath toward those who had betrayed her trust. In the royal healing chamber, The most advanced medical technology in the Zarian Empire hummed with activity. The sovereign protocols, reserved exclusively for the royal bloodline, had been activated. A specialized regeneration pod, far more sophisticated than the one Galen had experienced previously, now encased his convulsing form. The chief physician, Dr. Rila, monitored the readings with growing concern. The energy weapon caused systemic neural disruption, she explained as Queen Ziria entered the chamber. We're stabilizing him, but the damage is extensive. The queen approached the pod, placing her palm against its transparent surface as she had done before. Will he recover? Dr. Rila hesitated, a dangerous thing to do when addressing the sovereign, but medical truth demanded honesty. The technology designed for Zarian physiology is struggling to adapt to his human systems. We can keep him alive, but full recovery. She trailed off. Unacceptable, stated the queen flatly. You will adapt the technology. Whatever resources you require are at your disposal. Your Majesty, Dr. Rila ventured carefully. Even with unlimited resources, there are biological limitations too. I said unacceptable. Queen Ziria interrupted, her tone brooking no argument. This man has twice sacrificed himself for the crown. The crown will not fail him in return. The finality in her voice silenced any further objections. Dr. Rila bowed deeply and returned to her work with renewed urgency. Left alone with the unconscious Galen, Queen Ziria allowed herself a moment of genuine vulnerability. Her hand remained pressed against the pod, her reflection overlapping with his suspended form. Fool, she whispered, though whether to him or herself remained unclear. Why would you do this? Twice now. You've had no reason, no obligation. The door slid open quietly as Lieutenant Kyra entered, stopping at a respectful distance. Your Majesty, forgive the interruption. The High Council demands an immediate assembly to address the security breach. Queen Ziria did not turn. The High Council? The same council whose elder just attempted to murder me? They demand nothing. They claim that in times of crisis, protocol requires. I know what protocol requires. The Queen cut in. I also know that protocol failed to prevent traitors from infiltrating the highest levels of government. She finally turned to face the lieutenant. Tell the remaining council members they will wait until I have ensured the shield of Arvax is stable. Kyra bowed, but hesitated before leaving. The court is talking, Your Majesty, about your concern for the human. Let them talk, replied the Queen dismissively. They say it shows weakness, Kyra pressed on bravely, that your father would never have. My father, interrupted Queen Ziria with sudden heat, ruled through fear alone and died with a knife in his back placed there by someone who had smiled at him that very morning. Her voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. Perhaps there is strength in earning loyalty rather than demanding it. Perhaps there is wisdom in recognizing value, regardless of its source. Kyra nodded slowly, then departed to deliver the Queen's message to the waiting council. Alone once more, Queen Ziria returned her attention to the healing pod. Within it, Galen's condition appeared to be stabilizing, the violent convulsions gradually subsiding as the advanced medical systems worked to repair the damage caused by Draz's weapon. Live, she commanded softly. That is a royal order. Days passed in a blur of activity. The palace remained under strict lockdown as Commander Varek and his security forces methodically identified and apprehended conspirators. The scope of the plot proved even more extensive than initially feared, with tendrils reaching into multiple noble houses and military commands. Queen Ziria divided her time between overseeing the security investigation and monitoring Galen's treatment. The latter caused considerable consternation among the remaining council members, who viewed her personal attention to a non-Zarian as inappropriate at best and dangerously sentimental at worst. On the 5th day following the coup attempt, Galen's condition finally stabilized enough for the healing pod to be opened. As the regenerative fluid drained away, he regained consciousness slowly, his eyes focusing gradually on the now familiar figure of Queen Ziria standing beside the pod. We must stop meeting like this, he managed to say, his voice hoarse but steady. The queen's lips curved in the barest suggestion of a smile, perhaps the first genuine one she had shown in years. Twice now you have intercepted death meant for me. One might begin to suspect you enjoy healing pods. Galen attempted to sit up, wincing at the residual pain that coursed through his nervous system. The weapon. What was it? An abomination, she replied, her momentary levity vanishing. Designed specifically to bypass royal defenses and attack neural pathways. You should not have survived its effects. And yet, here I am, he said, looking around the chamber. This isn't the same medical facility as before. No, confirmed the queen. This is the royal healing chamber, reserved for the imperial bloodline and now, apparently, foolhardy humans with hero complexes. Dr. Rilla approached, scanner in hand. Your recovery defies medical expectation, she informed Galen after completing her examination. The sovereign protocols adapted to your physiology in ways we hadn't thought possible. Meaning, the doctor glanced at Queen Ziria before answering. Meaning that on a cellular level, you've been partially Zarianized. The advanced regeneration techniques have altered some aspects of your biology to facilitate healing. Galen absorbed this information with remarkable calm. Will I start turning green? Dr. Rilla looked startled by the question, but Queen Ziria actually laughed, a short, surprised sound that she quickly suppressed. No, the changes are primarily internal. Enhanced cellular regeneration, improved neural resilience. You remain frustratingly human in appearance. Your disappointment is noted, Your Majesty, Galen replied with a hint of a smile. Their exchange was interrupted as Commander Varek entered the chamber, his expression grave. Your Majesty, we've completed the interrogation of Council Elderdraz. You were right. The conspiracy reaches further than we initially believed. Queen Ziria's posture straightened, the brief moment of warmth replaced by imperial authority. How far? 3 noble houses, 2 military commands, and... Varek hesitated. And your cousin, second Prince Toril. The news struck with almost physical force. Prince Toril, though distant in the line of succession, was still blood family. One of the few relatives Ziria had trusted, at least partly. Bring me the evidence, she commanded, her voice steady despite the shock. I will review it personally. As Varek departed, Queen Ziria turned back to Galen, who had witnessed the exchange. It seems I must leave you to your recovery. The Empire requires my attention. Of course, he acknowledged, noting the swift return of her royal persona. Though if I might offer an observation, she paused at the door. You may. Betrayal by family cuts deeper than any weapon, he said quietly. Even queens are permitted to feel that pain. For a moment, it seemed she might rebuke him for the presumption. Instead, she nodded once, a nearly imperceptible acknowledgement of his insight, before departing to confront the expanding web of conspiracy that threatened her reign. Left alone with Dr. Rilla, Galen attempted to stand, testing his recovering body. How long before I'm fully functional again? The doctor's professional demeanor softened slightly. You shouldn't be conscious right now, let alone standing. Whatever you are made of, human, it is remarkably resilient. Necessity, he replied simply. The Queen still needs protection. Dr. Rilla regarded him curiously. You speak as though your obligation continues. You've already saved her life twice, at great personal cost. Most would consider any debt paid. It's not about debt, Galen said, steadying himself against the edge of the healing pod. It's about doing what's right. A novel concept in imperial politics, the doctor observed dryly. No wonder Her Majesty finds you so intriguing. Before Galen could respond to this surprising statement, Lieutenant Kyra arrived with fresh clothing suitable for his new station as Shield of Arvax. Simple but elegant garments in the royal colors, bearing the twin sun emblem that marked his unique position. The Queen has called for a purification assembly, Kyra informed him as he dressed. All remaining nobles and officials must attend. It's to be held tomorrow at midday. Purification? Galen questioned, recognizing an ominous tone in the term. A rare ceremony, Kyra explained. historically conducted only after attempted coups or significant betrayals. The guilty are judged, the innocent affirmed, and the empire cleansed. The lieutenant's careful phrasing suggested that such cleansing likely involved significant bloodshed. Galen nodded his understanding. "And my role in this? As Shield of Arvax, you stand with the Queen," Kairos stated. A visible reminder of true loyalty amidst those who faltered. The political symbolism was not lost on Galen. His presence would serve as both rebuke and challenge to the assembled court, a human displaying greater devotion than those born to serve. "Then I'd better be ready," he said, testing his still healing limbs. "I have a feeling tomorrow will be a defining day for the Empire." Kyra nodded grimly. "One way or another, the Zarian Empire will emerge changed. Whether for better or worse remains to be seen." As the twin suns set over the Imperial Palace, casting long shadows across the floating gardens, preparation for the purification assembly continued through the night. Guards were doubled, security protocols enhanced, and throughout the city, a tense anticipation built as word spread of the impending judgment. The Grand Hall, still bearing scars from the recent battle, had been transformed for the ceremony. The ornate throne now stood upon an elevated platform, surrounded by a circular arrangement of seats where the remaining loyal officials would witness the proceedings. Around the perimeter, royal guards stood at attention, their weapons prominently displayed, a clear message that this time no security breach would be tolerated. As the twin suns reached their zenith the following day, the assembly began. One by one, the nobles, military commanders, and planetary representatives filed in, their faces masks of careful neutrality. None wished to appear either too confident or too fearful, lest either expression be interpreted as guilt. Queen Ziria entered last, her appearance drawing audible gasps from several attendees. Gone was the ceremonial finery of previous court functions. Instead, she wore battle armor reminiscent of ancient Zarian war queens, functional, intimidating, and unmistakably martial. Her obsidian hair was pulled back severely, accentuating the cold perfection of her emerald features. At her side walked Galen, fully recovered and dressed in the formal attire of his new station, the Shield of Arvax emblem prominently displayed on his shoulder. They moved in tandem to the elevated platform, where the Queen took her seat upon the throne while Galen positioned himself at her right hand, a place traditionally reserved for the highest-ranked imperial advisor. The symbolism was lost on no one. "The Purification Assembly is convened," announced Commander Varek, his voice echoing through the hushed hall. "Let those who have remained loyal stand firm. Let those who have faltered face judgment." Queen Ziria surveyed the assembled dignitaries, her silver-ice gaze moving methodically from face to face. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a deadly calm. "Twice in recent days, traitors have attempted to end my reign through violence. Twice they have failed. Today we excise the rot that has infected our empire." At her signal, guards brought forth the first of the accused, Council Elder Draz, his shoulders still bandaged where the Queen's blade had struck him. Despite his captivity, he maintained a defiant posture as he was positioned in the center of the assembly. "Council Elder Draz," the Queen addressed him formally. "You stand accused of high treason, attempted regicide, and conspiracy against the Zarian Empire. The evidence against you has been verified through both testimony and technological means. Do you wish to speak before judgment is rendered?" Draz lifted his chin, his eyes burning with unrepentant zeal. "I acted to preserve the purity of our empire. Under your father, our dominance was unquestioned. Under you, we have begun to compromise. To accommodate." He spat the last word like a curse, his gaze flicking briefly to Galen. When a monarch places a conquered species on equal footing with Zarians, the empire has already begun to fall. Murmurs rippled through the assembly, quickly silenced by the Queen's raised hand. "Is that the extent of your defense? That you committed treason in the name of purity?" she asked, her tone deceptively mild. "Ikumita anotrasun draskuntarat." "I sought to prevent it. That human, He gestured toward Galen. Stands where only Zarian blood should be permitted. Yet you elevate him, honor him, shield him with royal protection. It is you, your majesty, who betrays our traditions. The hall grew deathly quiet, the accusation hanging in the air like a physical threat. Even those loyal to the queen held their breath, waiting to see how she would respond to such a direct challenge. Queen Ziria rose slowly from her throne, descending the steps until she stood directly before Draz. Though he towered over her physically, her presence seemed to diminish him. "My father," she began, her voice carrying to every corner of the hall, ruled through fear and isolation. He expanded our empire's borders while allowing its soul to wither. Under his reign, loyalty was demanded but never earned. She turned, addressing the entire assembly now. And what was the result? He died betrayed, as will all rulers who value blind obedience over true devotion. She gestured toward Galen. "This human, this shield of Arvax, owes me nothing. His world was conquered, his people subjugated. By all rights, he should rejoice at the prospect of my death. Yet twice he has placed himself between me and assassination. Not out of fear, not out of obligation, but out of a principle that has become foreign to this court. The principle that leadership must be worthy of sacrifice." Turning back to Draz, her expression hardened. "You claim to protect tradition? The oldest tradition of the Zarian Empire is that strength earns respect. This human has shown more strength in his sacrifices than you have demonstrated in your entire privileged existence." She returned to her throne, her verdict clear in her posture before she even spoke it. "Council Elder Draz, I find you guilty of all charges. The traditional punishment for such crimes is execution, along with the purging of your entire house." Draz paled visibly, though he remained defiant. "Then do it, and prove yourself the tyrant I always believed you to be." "No," Queen Ziria replied, surprising everyone. "Your punishment will be to live, to witness the empire evolve beyond your limited vision. You are hereby stripped of all titles, lands, and privileges. You will be exiled to the mining colony on Vex Prime, where you will labor alongside those you once considered beneath you." The sentence, life rather than death, caused more shock than execution would have. In Zarian tradition, a merciful death was considered more honorable than a life of disgrace. The remainder of the assembly proceeded with similar judgments. Several minor conspirators were executed, while those of higher rank or greater involvement received the same sentence as Draz, exile and labor. When Prince Toril was brought forth, many expected the queen to hesitate, to show some familial leniency. Instead, her judgment was swifter and more severe, sending him to the most dangerous of the mining worlds with no possibility of return. As the last of the traitors was removed from the hall, Queen Ziria addressed those who remained, the officials and nobles who had either supported her or at least abstained from treachery. "Today marks a turning point for the Zarian Empire," she declared. "For too long, we have equated domination with strength and fear with respect. True power comes not from subjugating others, but from inspiring them to stand beside you willingly." She gestured for Galen to step forward. "Behold the shield of Arvax, not born to our world, not bound by our blood, yet willing to sacrifice for our future. This is the loyalty I seek, earned not extracted." A ripple of uncertainty passed through the assembly. The queen's words represented a fundamental shift in imperial philosophy, one that many would struggle to accept. "From this day forward," she continued, "advancement in the imperial hierarchy will be based on merit, not bloodline. Planetary representatives will have greater voice in imperial decisions, and the conquered will have paths to citizenship based on service and loyalty." The pronouncement sent shock waves through the hall. Such reforms threatened centuries of noble privilege and racial supremacy. Yet no one dared voice opposition, not after witnessing the fate of those who had moved against the queen. "This assembly is concluded," Queen Ziria announced. "Return to your duties with this understanding. The Zarian Empire will be stronger, not weaker, for embracing loyalty wherever it is found. As the dignitaries filed out, many cast uncertain glances toward Galen, who remained at the queen's side. What had begun as a ceremonial position, the shield of Arvax, now appeared to herald a more profound transformation in imperial governance. When the hall had emptied save for the royal guards, Queen Ziria finally allowed herself a moment of visible fatigue. The weight of the day's judgments, coupled with the bold pronouncements of reform, had taken their toll even on her formidable stamina. "Are you all right?" Galen asked quietly, noting the subtle signs of exhaustion in her posture. "Ruling is never more difficult than when change is necessary," she replied. "Today I have made enemies of many who were merely skeptics before. You've also opened the door to allies who never thought themselves worthy of consideration," he pointed out. "Lieutenant Kyra, for instance, and others of her generation who value competence over tradition." Queen Ziria nodded thoughtfully. "Perhaps, but tradition does not yield easily, especially when it has benefited the powerful for so long." They walked together from the hall, their footsteps echoing in the now empty space. Through the windows, the twin suns had begun their descent, casting the palace in the golden hues of late afternoon. "Your reforms," Galen ventured after a moment of companionable silence. "They go beyond what I expected. Did you think me incapable of change?" There was a note of genuine curiosity in her question. "Not incapable," he clarified, "but perhaps unwilling. Power rarely relinquishes itself voluntarily. True power lies not in holding tight to privilege," she said, echoing her earlier pronouncement, "but in recognizing strength wherever it manifests." She paused, turning to face him directly. "Which brings me to a question I have postponed until now." Galen waited, sensing the shift in her demeanor. With the conspiracy suppressed and the empire entering a period of transformation, she said carefully, "You may wish to return to your world. As I promised before, I will honor that choice if it is your desire." The offer hung between them. Freedom, return, the chance to leave behind a world where he had been brought as a prisoner. Yet Galen hesitated, considering not just the opportunity to depart, but also what he would be leaving behind. "Is that what you want?" he asked instead of answering. "For me to go?" Queen Ziria's expression revealed nothing. "My wants are secondary to the needs of the empire. The question is what you desire, now that your obligation has been fulfilled many times over." Galen considered her words carefully. "If I choose to stay, what will my role be? An exotic curiosity? A living symbol of your new policies?" "You would be the shield of Arvax," she replied simply. "My protector, my advisor, my—" She paused, searching for the right word. "My conscience, perhaps. Someone who speaks truth without fear of consequence. And if I choose to go, then you depart with honor and my personal gratitude," she said, though something in her tone suggested the prospect displeased her more than she would admit. "A ship, resources, whatever you require for your journey home." Galen turned to the window, gazing out at the twin suns of Arvax as they painted the sky in shades of crimson and gold. "Home," he repeated softly. "I've thought about it often since being brought here. What would mean to return?" "And?" prompted the queen when he fell silent. "And I've realized something," he continued, turning back to face her. "Home isn't always where you began. Sometimes it's where you find purpose." He gestured to the emblem on his shoulder. "This isn't just a title to me. It's a responsibility I've chosen to accept." Understanding dawned in Queen Ziria's eyes. "Then you will stay?" "I will," he confirmed. "At least until this transition is secure. Until your reforms have taken root. After that," he shrugged, "we can revisit the question." Relief, quickly masked but unmistakable, flashed across the queen's features. "The shield of Arvax stands," she acknowledged formally, though the faintest curve of her lips betrayed her satisfaction. "The empire is fortunate." "As am I," he replied. "Not many get a second chance to build something worthwhile." Together, they continued their walk through the palace corridors, discussing the challenges ahead. The reforms would face resistance. The old guard would not surrender privilege easily, and beyond the palace walls, other threats undoubtedly waited. But for now, in this moment of transition, a foundation had been laid for something new, something that neither of them could have imagined when a prisoner first knelt before a queen. In her private chambers later that evening, Queen Xeria stood before an ancient artifact, a ceremonial armband worn by Xerian monarchs since the founding of the empire. Its metal, a rare alloy found only in the depths of Arvax, shimmered with an inner light that seemed to respond to her touch. After a moment's consideration, she summoned her personal attendant. "Bring the shield of Arvax to my chambers," she instructed. "There is a matter I wish to discuss with him." When Galen arrived, he found the queen standing before the artifact, her expression contemplative. "You summoned me, your majesty?" She turned, the formality of the throne room absent in the privacy of her chambers. "Xeria," she corrected gently, "when we are alone, I would have you use my name." The shift surprised him, but he nodded his acceptance. "Xeria, then." She gestured to the armband. "Do you know what this is?" "A royal artifact of some kind," he guessed. "It appears very old. It dates back to the first Xerian empress," she explained. "Legend holds that she forged it from metals taken from the heart of Arvax itself. Every ruler since has worn it during their coronation, a symbol of connection to our world and our history." She lifted the armband carefully. "There is another tradition, less widely known. When a monarch finds someone they trust absolutely, beyond doubt, beyond question, they may bestow a token derived from this metal. It creates a bond that transcends ordinary allegiance." Understanding dawned in Galen's eyes as she revealed a smaller band, similar in design, but scaled for human proportions. "This was crafted while you recovered," she explained. "I ordered it after your first sacrifice, before I even knew if you would survive." "I don't know what to say," he admitted, genuinely moved by the significance of the gesture. "Say nothing," she replied. "Simply accept it, if you are willing to bear what it represents." Galen extended his arm, allowing her to place the band above his wrist. As it settled against his skin, he felt a curious warmth, not uncomfortable, but noticeable. The metal seemed to adjust itself, conforming perfectly to his arm. "The metal recognizes you," Xeria observed with satisfaction. "It accepts your worthiness." With the ceremonial band in place, she placed her palm against his, their foreheads nearly touching in the traditional Xerian gesture of profound respect, a gesture historically reserved for equals. "From this moment forward," she said softly, "you are bound not to the throne, but to me, not as subject, but as trusted ally. The scars you bear for my sake will forever be honored, and the loyalty you have shown will be returned in equal measure." Galen completed the gesture, his forehead gently meeting hers. "I accept this honor," he replied, "and all it entails." As they stood there, connected by touch and by the mystical metal that now linked them, the last light of the twin suns filtered through the chamber windows. It cast their joined shadows as a single silhouette against the far wall. No longer queen and protector, ruler and subject, but something new. Partners in the reformation of an empire, bound by trust forged in the crucible of sacrifice. Outside the palace walls, news of the day's events spread rapidly through the capital city and beyond, carried by official proclamations and whispered rumors alike. Tales of the human who twice saved the queen, of the shield of Arvax who stood at her right hand during the purification assembly, grew with each telling. Many embraced the symbolism, seeing hope in this unprecedented alliance between Xerian royalty and a member of a conquered species. Others viewed it as confirmation of their worst fears, the dilution of Xerian supremacy, the beginning of the empire's decline. But within the palace, as night fell over Arvax, such concerns seemed distant. The wounds of betrayal were beginning to heal, and in their place, something unexpected had taken root, a bond that transcended division, a loyalty born not of coercion but of choice, and a shared vision for what the Xerian Empire might become. For Galen, the scars he carried from those poisoned arrows and that deadly energy weapon were no longer marks of suffering, but badges of honor, tangible reminders that some rewards cannot be measured in power or prestige, but in the trust of someone worthy of sacrifice. For Queen Xeria, the presence of the shield of Arvax represented not weakness, as her detractors claimed, but a new kind of strength. The strength to recognize value beyond traditional boundaries, to earn loyalty rather than demand it, and to forge connections that could withstand the deadliest of attacks. Together, they stood at the threshold of transformation, their unlikely alliance a testament to the fact that sometimes the most profound changes begin with a single selfless act. The moment when one person steps in front of flying arrows to save another, expecting nothing in return but the satisfaction of preserving something worthy of protection. As the palace settled into night and the twin moons of Arvax rose to replace the twin suns, Queen Ziria and her shield shared a quiet moment on the balcony overlooking the floating gardens. No words were needed as they contemplated the stars above, the same stars that spanned the distance between their worlds, no longer dividing them, but connecting them in ways neither could have imagined when their paths first crossed. The reward, as promised, had indeed been worth every scar.